Good afternoon. Welcome to the Wildlife Trust's Farming with Nature tent. My name is Ian Stevenson. I am the Land Advice Manager for the Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts, and we have a fantastic session entitled Through the Maze. And as I said, it's not about maize or mazes. This is all about farmer clusters, which are an incredibly important thing. And just to let you know, if, like me, you hate being filmed, then maybe just sort of edge your way to the back because we're going to film the audience as well. We're going to leave loads of time for audience questions, so please store up your questions. And when we get to you, if you can stand up, that would be amazing. We have a roving mic, so please wait for that to arrive before you ask your question. And hopefully some of us will hang around afterwards so you can have a good chat then if we don't have time for it. But as I said, we have a fantastic panel. We have Jonty Brunier, we have Jenny Phelps, we have Alex Donnelly and Alex Robinson, who are going to talk all about farmer clusters. And why on earth do we want to talk about farmer clusters? And I should also acknowledge that a lot of the hard work for this session has been put in by Jenny, so kudos to Jenny. But why do we want to talk about farmer clusters? Because it's a really timely moment. Just over there, you will see the DEFRA tent. A new scheme is coming out called the Farmer Collaboration Fund. Many of you will be very familiar with the Facilitation Fund. In terms of the Facilitation Fund, my colleagues here will tell you how much I love paperwork. But even for me, the Facilitation Fund was a little bit too much. So I think we're all hoping that the new scheme will be easier to use and it's really going to help and support farmers in these collaborative networks, which are so important for farming, but also for wildlife as well. And as I said, a lot of these schemes are hugely complex. You can end up trying to secure funds from loads of different places. Sometimes they close, sometimes they're open, the window's quite narrow. It's really hard to make sense of all that, and that's where the maze comes in. Basically, it's a maze of different things that you've got to find your way through, and you need good facilitation in order to get through that. But clusters themselves are really important as well because they can help with things like financial resilience. They can help you sort of understand the underpinning role of natural capital. They're incredibly important for social value as well, but also they can help with things like de-risking transitions to nature-friendly farming and, as I said, understanding all these different ways of financing things. So they're really important, but so is good facilitation. And we're going to hear more about both the role of clusters and facilitation from this panel here today. So, you don't want to hear any more from me, I can assure you. We're going to start with some of the excellent work around the Regenerative Agriculture Accelerator Programme with Jonty, RAP, and the North East Cotswolds Farmer Cluster and the Emergent Generation. So without further ado, can I hand over to you, please, Jonty?
Thank you. Are we on? We're not on. Are we not up? Can you hear that? Is that all right? Yeah. We can't see slides from there, so we have to stand up. Is there a clicker? Ah, it's there. Thank you. So I'm Jonty, and you might have heard this before. I'm an agroecological, nature-friendly, regenerative, rare breed, free-range, organic, pasture-fed farmer. There we go, at Connigree Farm in the Cotswolds, National Trust tenant. Collaboration starts for me at the farm level. So I've got joint ventures at the farm. I love working with people. It brings people, skills, knowledge, more fun, as well as more output and outcomes. Then I span out from that, and I was very lucky to be part of the sort of founder group of the North East Cotswold Farmer Cluster, which you might have heard about already today or last year at Groundswell. I think we're now the biggest in the country, Caroline, is that right? I keep saying that. 60,000 hectares, 200 farmers. And again, correct me, Caroline, 120 million we've just won from Landscape Recovery. We started 5 years ago with four of us in a room. And it was a farmer. I don't know if Sam Sandberg's in the room. She normally is. No, Sam. Sam came to me and said, Jonty, I want to join some wildflower meadows up. I want to do a bit of mapping and make stewardship work a bit harder in the valley. I've heard of these things called cluster groups. Could you form a cluster group? Could you facilitate? I said, no. I'm not doing it, but I'll chair the first few meetings. I was working at FarmEd at the time. So we got 10 of us in a room, and then 20, and then 30, and we workshopped what our local farmers wanted in the North East Cotswolds and the Evenlode Valley, next to Jeremy Clarkson, yeah, all of that, and Blenheim and Dalesford and down to Whitney. Wonderful area, full of great farmers, mixed farmers, arable farmers, entrepreneurial farmers, people with a bit of money as well, quite a lot of bankers in that area of the countryside. But we got in the room. What did they want? They wanted help with stewardship and mapping. They wanted help with carbon and baselining. They wanted help with entrepreneurship and enterprise and routes to market. They wanted help with community connection as well, and skills and knowledge. So we worked out what our group of farmers wanted. And then I said we need to be a thing. Let's not just be a project that meets now and again. Let's make it a thing. So we won some funding, some FIPL. We got Tim Field as facilitator from Dalesford. We got a CIC, we got a brand, we got a website, and then you are a thing. Then farmers can spot you and people can come to you. Funders can find you. We went from 30 to 40 to 60 to 100 farmers. We started taking member subs, got some more FIPL, some Rothschild, some NERF funding, bigger and bigger, I'm going to say about 2 million. We even grow our own wild bird food in the valley, and we mix and mill stuff, and we monitor all the farmland birds. Everything is grown that we feed the birds in the valley is grown locally. And then we went landscape recovery. The rest is history, 120 million. The most adventurous landscape recovery project in the country, pushing the boundaries. That's the North East Cotswold cluster. You'll hear more about that later, maybe. RAP, Regenerative Agriculture Accelerator Programme. That's Cotswolds wide. I noticed that the Cotswolds was a hotbed of regen and agroecology, and I wanted to bring people together. Skills and knowledge, really, confidence and connection. So we have about 100 farmers and advisors now that meet every month, farm walks, etc. And that's at bioregional level. So we've gone from farm to landscape to bioregion. Regen Deep is now what it hangs off, which is a hub for agroecology and regen across the Cotswolds. But that wasn't enough for me. I want to do UK collaboration as well in clustering. So Emergent Generation is the youth movement that I've built with fellow young people and directors, bringing young people together to collaborate as well. 18 to 35. You all look under 35, so please do join Emergent Generation. We encourage, enable and empower people to deliver. And lots of facilitators, young facilitators, are MGEM members, so do join us. And I'll stop there. Other than to say, if you can see that, I think that's our challenge. As collaborators, as cluster group facilitators, remember, everyone is different. Everyone's at a different stage of the journey. Everybody needs different touch points, and they all learn in different ways. Some people will need a leg up, some are natural mentors, some are at the top, some have fallen off. Which one are you on that tree? And I'll leave you with that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, John T. A quick question from me. Quick question from me. So, setting up a community interest company and uniting all these different land managers across counties is a huge feat. But looking back at the early days, what kind of social barriers were in place? How did you get around them?
The social barriers of a cluster group?
Indeed.
The social barriers, I think confidence and connection and making it not too woo-woo. How do you get people in the room first? Get them in once or twice, then the conversation can open up. Working with what they want, a bit of mentoring and coaching approach, I think really helps with that. And free beer.
Free beer is always good. But you've said you've got experience at FarmEd and RAU, Royal Agricultural University. And what kind of formal learning environments work best to support these kind of agricultural transitions as well as clusters?
The formal learning side, with my academic hat on, it's that thing again, understanding people's learning journeys, and that everyone is different, so I like a multi-method approach. Yeah, farm walk's fine for some. Some people want data, some people need inspiring, some people need peer-to-peer mentoring and long-term coaching. Yeah. We all learn differently, and that's really important. You need to try things. Some things will fail. Some people won't turn up. You've got to be brave and be creative, but understanding learning objectives and learning journeys.
Brilliant, thank you. And your farm, Coneygree Farm, you've successfully stacked different enterprises, lots of different things going on, and this is going to be a continuing theme as we speak to different panellists. How would a cluster network help individual farms to get their head around that kind of stacking approach?
Number one, I think, is skills and knowledge. So sharing what is enterprise stacking, what are the opportunities, agroecological principles. You all know the 13 principles of agroecology. Yeah, good. Go beyond the 6 principles of regen, 13 principles of agroecology. That's where diversity and synergy and enterprise stacking comes in. So we need to share that knowledge and skills. And then you've got access to people within a cluster group. And how often do we get asked, John T, the big barrier is access to land? No, it is not. Give young people and new entrants the confidence to knock on doors, go to people in the cluster group. Could I have 3 acres for a market garden? Could I be your mob grazing cattle person? Could I start a chicken enterprise with you? Yes. Those cluster group landholders can help land seekers in the district. Cluster groups should be more than farmers. This is rural economy we're starting to talk about. It's everybody in the landscape, not just the landholders. And I think we, as facilitators, we need to bring them together.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. A round of applause for John T. So you've shown what's possible when a community unites, but mobilising a landscape requires an operational framework to ensure local voices don't get lost in the noise. Jenny Phelps, you've spent over 3 decades perfecting an integrated local delivery model to do just that. Over to you.
Thank you. Can I have my slides on the screen, please? Oh. Fantastic. Anyhow, so yeah, for many of you will have heard me talk about this before, but what I was hoping that this session would do when I wrote it was to say, you'll hear inspiring things at Groundswell, and you'll hear people like John T saying about how amazing it is that, that these things are happening, but how do you enable them to happen everywhere, and how do you contextualize them within your locality? And so what I'm hoping is this will give you some sort of tools to enable you to say, well, if I go home and I want to do this, how do I do this? And who do I do this with? So the integrated framework came out of a heritage lottery project that I was involved with over 20 years ago now. And what was really interesting for me when I went out as a farming person into this sort of landscape of how do we become resilient to climate change was various things that were really striking. One was that they didn't value the knowledge of the farmers and the people who lived and had the cultural connection to the land, and that there were millions of different stakeholders who those people didn't understand how they operated or how they interconnected. And that there were millions of different funding streams that were there that actually nobody knew how to access, and Alex is going to talk a bit more about that later on. So we've spent sort of like probably 20 years now delivering all of our projects through this idea that we can act really quickly and with purpose to be able to understand where we live, who are the partners, who are the people that live there, how can they be inspired and connected and value the farming community to build resilience urgently to climate change. So I don't know if you can see the words, but basically over the last, since Brexit, but before that, we've been doing a series of farmer-led projects that I was talking about yesterday that have been building this knowledge about how do we create local resilience? How do we actually start to enable people to become much more connected to the land around them, the farmers around them, reducing the risk of lack of food security, and actually starting to replicate the sort of things that John T's talking about everywhere. So for me, it's been really exciting because we've been funded and working with farmers like Alex and our farmer group, which he'll talk a bit more about later on, can we actually start to see how the rest of society could actually work to a framework that we could all act in those places. So through our facilitators, we're able to, there's a facilitator training course I'll come on a bit about later on, and through our ELMS trials, we started to explore with brilliant people like my colleague Jenny Salter, who's in the front here, and my other 2 colleagues who worked on our Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund project, is how can we create a pathway where we can all locally rapidly invest in what we need to connect society to farmers at what scale of locality and get that rapid investment back in to put back all the stuff we need for shortening supply chains, like abattoirs, like processing, like growing areas, like community energy, and how do we do that where we can all do it? So what was really interesting, and you'll see there's a map there, you may not be able to see it, I've got some bigger ones there which you can talk a bit more about later on, but what we learned through our NERF project is that we're not connecting to the economic risk that we as farmers and land managers in our farmer groups can protect society from the economic risk that we have facing climate change. And we learned in our Cirencester project, our case study in the Churn, of which Alex has been very much involved, that there was just under £1 billion worth of economic risk in this small water body where conjoined farmers, over 60 farmers up catchment, could actually de-risk nearly £1 billion worth of economic value. Why is that important? Because it's important because people work in those businesses. We all love our communities that are downstream from us as farmers. And actually that resilience, if you've watched the National Emergency Briefing, is absolutely urgent that we start to look at how we actually provide sort of like food resilience, water resilience, food security, ecological recovery. So it was like massively exciting for us that we thought, gosh, this is really interesting. And then Jen and I sort of came up with scratching our heads about, well, what do we want to do with all these businesses and asset owners down catchment? Do we want to ask them to plant trees? Do we want them to create wetlands? And we're like, well, no, because there's billions of funding streams that we can facilitate that already do that. There's trees coming out of our ears, hedges coming out of our ears. What isn't there funding for? There isn't funding for the facilitators to facilitate all of that funding stream. So what we decided was that with our case study, that we will create an opportunity for our community downstream in the Churn catchment to use an existing special purpose vehicle, in this case it's Cirencester Community Development Trust, for our community, our businesses and our asset owners to put in a little bit of money collaboratively to fund the facilitator up catchment to be able to lever in masses of funding from multiple sources. I mean, at a meeting the other night, I ran out after 20 different funding streams I can facilitate in that one catchment, but nobody's here to join it up. We need to fund facilitators. So why I think it's exciting, and I will stop there because I don't want to take too much time, is having watched the emergency briefing and being part of the brilliant facilitator forum that agroecology is fronting up, and the great work of Tom Scrope, is that we thought, well, actually, could we scale this? Could we actually create an opportunity that every group of farmers could work at a hyper-local level along water bodies, connecting communities, and starting to be able to understand what is the economic risk at the bottom of those groups of farmers and connect socially and culturally, as Jonty was saying. So for me, it's quite interesting because if you look at the interactive map, there's a QR code which is on the map down here, which I'll show you later. You can all access that map. You can all find out where you live. You can find the water body that you live in, and you can click on that, and you can find all the economic risk that is downstream in that water body. So you could actually go to your local authority or your district council, county council, and say, we're a group of farmers, and we live in this area, and this is our village, and these are the towns that are downstream of us, and this is how much they need to be protected from climate change, and how we all need food security. And we can start to build that. And if we then ask those businesses to fund facilitators, we could actually end up with having the amount of people that we need to go out there and actually fix a sort of response to the climate briefing, and so we can all crack on as quickly as we possibly can. So I think that's really exciting. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jenny. You have just mentioned your fantastic rural facilitator training course, which many wildlife trust advisors go on as well, which is brilliant. What is the one tip you would give a new facilitator?
Oh, that's really interesting. I think it's interesting that what I would give a new facilitator is be kind to everybody, listen to everybody, be inclusive to everybody, and it's a team approach. And actually, what we're facilitating is the respect of knowledge and the sharing of knowledge, and that's all types of knowledge. So it's the connection between people who have indigenous local knowledge with academic knowledge, with experts, and actually just having an open mind and never being judgmental about people, bringing everybody together.
Amen. Brilliant. Thank you. And also your framework is brilliant, identifying priorities, but that can come with kind of competing priorities. So how do you help a facilitator cut through those competing priorities?
I think it's interesting because I think it's really by consensus in a sense. I think most often we don't come with much conflict in our projects because it's collaborative, and so I think that in a sense that obviously there are constraints that we come up with, like not planting trees in certain places in national landscapes will be an example, but we need to work on the fact that we are actually in a climate emergency, and if you watch the emergency briefing, we need to crack on. So we need to prioritise all the things that will make us safe in a changing world.
Absolutely. The time is now. Thank you, Jenny. As the movement grows, we need to think about how we support facilitators themselves, as Jenny's just outlined, but sometimes it can really help to look at multiple facilitators within a landscape, and that brings us over to Alex Donnelly from the Berks, Bucks and Oxon Wildlife Trust. You're coordinating a massive network of farmers and facilitators at BBOUT. Please tell us more about it.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, sorry, I just realized my slides were in my outbox this morning, so I'm just going to sit and have a nice chat. I am the Farmer Facilitator Networks Officer at BBOUT. To my friends who aren't in the field, I like to describe my role as the person who supports the people who are supporting farmers. But at BBOUT currently, we support a network of 12 farmer facilitators who then in turn support 15 farmer clusters. And if you can imagine my beautiful imaginary slides at the moment, there is a map showing over 100,000 hectares, which is pretty unique. We have quite a big impact. So a big part of my role is regular one-to-one catch-ups with the facilitators, where we talk through how things are going, what challenges they're facing, what support would be most useful for them. And with those conversations, they really shape what we do as a network, whether that be the events that I organize, the professional training that we bring in, or even the subjects and topics that we choose to prioritize in our peer-to-peer exchanges. So we're really looking to create a space for facilitators to learn from each other, so that they can openly share ideas, what's working, what's not working, and avoid everyone kind of reinventing that wheel. Also, we're trying to remove barriers wherever we can. So an example of this is I administer our seed pot funding for cluster projects, and we worked with the facilitators to, we were just conscious of not creating a new time-consuming, cumbersome funding application. So we worked with the facilitators to kind of create a light-touch application where we can quickly get through that application and award that funding, just being conscious of their time. We also prioritized projects involving collaboration between clusters, and asked every successful project to then share what they learned and their learnings with other cluster members. So those benefits extended well beyond that individual project. Another part of my role, I kind of like to think of my facilitators as A-listers. I'm kind of like their PR agent, their manager. So I'm acting as a representative, hence why I'm probably here today, for the network. So, you know, they're incredibly busy supporting farmers. So I make sure that their collective experience is heard with those conversations with researchers, funders, who else? I know pretty much everyone really at festivals. So I'm just making sure that they don't miss opportunities that could benefit their clusters. So ultimately, we're building a community where facilitators are just as connected as the farmers they support. So yeah, that's really how we're helping them navigate that maze. Yeah, and just making sure that knowledge flows across the network rather than staying within those individual clusters.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah, I've never spoken to a mic before, so.
Brilliant. That was really good. Thank you. So you're talking to loads of different facilitators, and more groups are looking to get involved in collaboration. What are the core skills a modern facilitator needs to successfully guide farmers through this complex landscape maze?
I was actually just talking to Jenny because I went to one of her sessions in the workshop tent yesterday where this question was asked, and the general consensus was winging it. Which I really wholeheartedly agree with, but also I kind of like a bit of a blueprint. So if I was to break down winging it, I would say listening. I mean, even the most experienced facilitators, they don't know all the answers. So they've really got to understand what their farmers' needs are. So you've got to be able to listen and translate sometimes a complex language that comes with these policies and environmental grants to layman's terms, I suppose. So yeah, being able to listen and communicate for sure. Second is being a people person, connecting people, I would say. I mean, a facilitator is constantly spotting opportunities, whether that's introducing the right farmers to other farmers, again, to researchers, or helping translate that complex policy landscape into something practical and relevant. And then the last one would definitely be perseverance. Collaboration takes time, and building trust doesn't just happen overnight. So I think Tim actually said yesterday, who is a facilitator for the Northeast Cotswold cluster, that when he started out, he only had 1 or 2 farmers showing up to those meetings. And fast forward to today, he has about, over 200 members. So yeah, I think just knowing that facilitation isn't about instant results, it's about constantly showing up and building those relationships.
Absolutely, thank you. And looking at your network of facilitators and you're sort of comparing that to almost trying to do it on your own, what is the advantage of a farmer joining an established facilitator-led cluster compared to trying to figure it out for yourself?
The free pub lunches are really good. No. Maybe just not having to navigate that complex landscape on their own. Being part of a facilitator-led cluster saves you time. You're not trying to work out everything from scratch. You have someone who can help interpret everything, identify those funding opportunities, strengthen those collaborative applications, connect you with the right people. But it's not just about the facilitator. You're also joining a community of farmers who know your landscape. So instead of learning everything through trial and error, you can just peek over the fence and see and learn from their mistakes or their successes. But often these relationships lead to practical things too. So sharing equipment, developing joint projects, accessing funding together, or simply just picking up the phone to that sympathetic ear. It can be quite an isolating role being a farmer. So I think just having that supportive network around you, is really valuable.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. A round of applause for Alex. Fantastic. Thank you. Alex, it's clear that having a strong network of facilitators help build the confidence farmers need to collaborate. And I should have mentioned we've got 2 Alexes and it's going to confuse me. But the big question then shifts to sort of long-term economic viability, all these different funding streams to get your head around. So please tell us more about how that applies to what your work and what you're doing.
I will do my best, Ian. Thank you. I hope this slide looks better from your angle than it does from mine, because I can barely make anything out on it. The red line around here is the Upper Thames catchment cluster area. It's also the catchment boundary, that geographical area, and that's where our members sit within. The little blue area here is about 10,000 hectares. It's the 3 sub-catchments that feed into Cirencester. And Jenny made the great point that Cirencester's got £1 billion worth of infrastructure or commercial assets within there. Well, there's only 10,000 hectares upstream that are really flowing down to influence that. That's not that big an area to need to focus in on. And it's a sort of sub-cluster within the cluster itself. And my farm, Moorwood, sits within there, where I've got the ability to influence roughly 4% of that area. That means I can't solve problems, but it means I can have actually a reasonably outsized influence compared to a lot of others. So hopefully a little bit of context. Across the farm, I've been doing lots of different things. A lot of them through the cluster. So things like bringing cattle back on with Silas and Luke. Silas has been cutting about quite a bit today. That partnership came about through a cluster contact who knew I was looking to work with a grazer and partner with a grazer to be able to do that. Planting trees through UCO, vegetation surveys and baselining not done by my kiddies in there, but again, grant supported. Western Forest, big shout out to them. They've been very kind and supported us with these very, very smart log benches, which my kiddies are, again, testing out to see if there's any springs in them. There's not. But those, I think, really are there because we've been trying to create more open access in certain parts of the farm where we've been planting some of the woodland. and Western Forest have been kind enough, again, as another body with a grant body with some money to support that. We've been putting in wetlands, so district licensing for newts, soil sampling across the farm, and the top right-hand corner is some stream re-wriggling and floodplain reconnection. So almost all of that has had a degree of grant funding, and almost all of that has come through the cluster in some format or another. So as an individual, I can stay on top of SFI broadly, and I put my application in a couple of days ago. I can stay on top of things like higher tier stewardship, of which my offer is accepted, and I'm just going through the final stages of the application. I can stay on top of things like mid-tier when they existed, and I went through five years of that ending last year. I can stay on top of things like the England Woodland Creation Offer. I've never heard, or 2-3 years ago, I'd never heard of the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, let alone knew that they had funding available that I might be able to tap into. And where would I start on that? Luckily, I've got a Jenny who knows exactly where to go. She's already told me off because I've missed off NERF funding, which we received as part of the cluster through here, and ELM's test and trial funding on the test through here. But I put this into ChatGPT, Jenny, and it didn't know all of the funding sources available. And this is just public funding sources. So as an individual farmer, I think it's impossible for you to stay on top of all the individual funding sources available. And you certainly can't apply for them all by yourself. For farming in protected landscapes, I've done one application myself. I've been part of 7 cluster-wide applications that have benefited us, whether that's barn owl boxes, up through to soil sampling and orchid surveys and everything else. So there's almost impossible by yourself as a farmer to do all of that. You have to work with a cluster. But how can a cluster know? How can Jenny know what I might be open to doing or up for if we don't engage and I don't put forward to her? I'm not prepared to share and collaborate, even if it's just with her as the cluster lead, what I might be up for doing over in the future on my farm. So for the last sort of 10 years, I've had a running shared map, which basically is all the prospective projects I might be open to doing. Lots of different scenarios. The Regional Flood and Coastal Committee one, which is paid for the stream re-wriggling that we did a couple of months ago, that sat on Land App for the last 7 years doing nothing because I haven't been able to justify the 15 grand to go out and do it. Luckily, Jenny's been able to source that, and half a dozen other members upstream of us have all are in the process of those sorts of projects being delivered on there as well. So this is where clusters are absolutely fundamental. But as a farmer, you've got to engage with your cluster and feed through the prospective projects that you might be willing to do. Just put that fly in the water so that you can have something to consider, and you've got the ability for those opportunities to come to you, because if no one knows about them, they aren't going to find their way to you very easily. And that's the sort of the public sector side of it. The private sector needs exactly the same thing. The private sector, and this is with my Zora Ecosystems hat on, 2 catchment pieces of work we've done. One in the Idle catchments, that's Nottingham Way, and the Wharf catchment in Yorkshire. Both of those looking at catchment-scale analytics, where we took the stormwater drainage for Severn Trent in some of the towns within the Idle, and we ran flood modelling on that to see where we could have the greatest impact, or where nature-based solutions could have the greatest impact on slowing flow into their stormwater network. Now, luckily, there's a lovely former FWAG advisor up there as well, Leslie Sharp, who's got an operational catchment. It's not in landscape recovery. It's not doing anything like the sorts of things that John T's team are at, but it's still operational, and it's got members. And Leslie, grilled me. I managed to pass the test, and she wrote to all her cluster members and introduced us straight away to go. It's worth chatting to Alex to start to find a way to try and see if there are projects that you might be open to doing. But not a single one of the farmers, the sort of 15 farmers I spoke to, had projects already sort of there lined up, ready, that they would be open to doing. It all came as a starting point plan to go, right, well, I could consider doing, that's one of your priority areas, I suppose I could consider doing something there. It's much, much quicker and much easier for everybody, and therefore costs less, that you're removing the obstacles between you if you as a farmer, or you as a cluster, as part of a cluster, have got those sorts of things available for then overlays where opportunity is coming to you, can try and be conjoined together. the wharf, there was no cluster at all. So I was then working with the likes of the Rivers Trust, the Wildlife Trust, and other people who have got contacts in those locations to reach out directly and individually to the farmers. It's even slower, it's even more painful. And Yorkshire Water have got £1 million funding pot, well, £2 million funding pot to go into these sorts of things coming forward. They're just trying to work out exactly how to structure that. That's really significant amounts of money to come forward into these locations, in that instance to impact bathing water quality. But none of this works unless you're proactive. You can plan where you might want to do something, and then you feed that up to your cluster lead. So at least they're aware of as that first point of contact. If you're doing that as the basics across the cluster, you're setting yourselves up to succeed and eventually push towards landscape recovery or any other opportunity as it finds its way towards you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex. That's really useful. And we're going to come to your questions in a minute. I've got a couple of questions, so build your questions and try and think what you might want to ask the panel. But you said earlier 8 different funding streams, which is pretty incredible. How do you keep track of that? What kind of tracking metrics do you use in order to sort of prove the value of things like natural capital?
So for me, the funding, the different public funding streams really are just, I can't afford as a farmer. I simply cannot afford to operate without them. If there's other farmers out there who can ignore them, they're making more money and doing better than me. I cannot do that. I have to utilise those. But for me, it's not about just going, oh, there's a funding pot, I'll just do what they want. It has to then align with my mission, my vision for what I'm trying to do on the farm. And building resilience, building a herd, great example, building a herd with size. This takes years and years and years to build it. I'm not going out and spending hundreds of thousands of pounds to just have a herd automatically. This is, it's going to take us 3 or 4 years to build up to where we need to. And then there's still refinement after that. So everything you're trying to do at a farm level, when you're building resilience, moving your business forward, it takes a long time to do. And Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, getting the funding for that, that's 18 months, 2 years to get through funding for creating woodland. It's really, really slow approaches. So you have to be in it for the long term. You've got to be sure you want to do it. But to do it without the funding, yes, you can move very quickly, but you need very deep pockets to be able to do it.
Thank you. But does working as a collaborative cluster actually make your farm more attractive to investors?
I think so, because otherwise, whoever I'm engaging with has to deal with me. I'm 4% of the upstream above Cirencester. By itself, it's marginal gains. With the other half a dozen farmers in our projects, that's already a significant piece going forward, much bigger than just by myself. So I think it's a no-brainer for farmers to be within a cluster and just to get the basics there. And for those that aren't in a cluster, I would really encourage them to help try and set one up, even if it's very informal. Have a point of contact and just to try and move it forward, because if you're not in there, it's very hard to then be, frankly, even in the game by yourself.
Brilliant, thank you. So, lovely audience, over to you. Put your hand up if you have a question. We have one here.
Thanks very much for the great presentation. I'm from Northern Ireland, you guessed by accent, and I'm going to be in charge in landscape recovery. So hearing from you guys and how we work in clusters is really important. But from my job with the National Trust, I've kind of found it that if I left it to the farmers, they may not have suggested things. So I've had to suggest what could be possible and possible money, because money talks. I'm a farmer as well. So I just wondered, because you were saying about you let the farmers come with ideas, and from my experience, if I did that, possibly maybe not much would have come on the table. So it's probably a balance between the two. So I just wondered if you maybe wanted to chat between that sort of side of things.
Wholeheartedly agree. You're absolutely right. It's there's day jobs within all of this as well. You can only be focused on so much, and you need insights. Groundswell's a great place. Everyone's gathering insights and learning. You need to see what other people are doing. That's where a cluster is so good. You're getting off farm and you're doing it locally alongside everyone else. So absolutely, that's exactly what that facilitator is there to help encourage. But it's the farmer's decision. So that's why different scenarios. Don't have to take it to an extreme. It's just going, what might I be open to? And then you've got to go, is that financially viable as well? So some options might not be at certain times, but might become so later on down the line. My encouragement is just think much more broadly. Don't close things off. Work with the facilitator, and just try and build that knowledge in, but just keep very open-minded throughout the whole time.
And yeah, just to support that, just to say that Alex had this great idea, which is about creating an opportunity wish list, because a lot of our farmers, I mean, particularly, people that I work with and my son and people like that, I'm like, what are your problems? What do you need to fix? And it's like last year it was all about, people worried about the amount of flies, and we're like, let's do a dung beetle project, And so I think the idea was that in the future world we need to create, what is it that we need? Is it more infrastructure? Is it investment in shortening supply chains, as I mentioned earlier on? And I think some of us think, because we can't personally afford it, we think, oh, I'd love solar panels, or I'd love this, or I'd love that. But as Alex says, let's list what it is we need for that future world. And if we know that the people downstream really want us to help build that resilience, then maybe we can fund facilitating some of the things that are needed. I mean, in our district, we have people just championing, how to do solar panels and community energy, and so I think that's the thing, is that connection. It's giving them the mindset, Jonty's using Jonty's words, to actually think about the future. What are our future needs, and then facilitating that.
And just to be slightly controversial, Kevin, I'm a National Trust tenant. For 20 years we tried to get our tenants to work together on our estate. It doesn't work. You've got to get outside the National Trust red line, and you probably need an independent facilitator. All those tenants have different peer-to-peer networks. Rarely is the landlord the network coordinator.
Brilliant. Any other questions? I think we had one just down here.
Hi. This all sounds amazing and really exciting, but I'm from Guernsey, and the funding for anything on Guernsey is only given to dairy farmers who are basically chemically driven. I'm part of a team who are trying to change the current 98% of all food eaten on Guernsey is imported. We're trying to get that to 30, but we have no recognition of anyone growing food in any way, shape or form. How do I get those growers together? How do I facilitate that? How do we then become a force for change to get an agricultural policy written by the government that isn't just about milk?
Alec, do you know the ink spot theory? Okay. Hit a small area really hard, right? So you're the ripple. It starts with you and spins out, and that you've got to influence, get people working together. And one example of how an island has done it, Salt Spring Island, near Vancouver.
And can I just say also that I'm not sure my mic's working. That's better. Sorry. Just to say that the way that I work and what the integrated framework is about is that we all live on the same biosphere, and we're all linked in to all of the international treaties that are around climate adaptation, and that all of your local authorities, or who you have in Guernsey, or you have one, is tied into that network. They will have a duty to carbon. They will have a duty to nature, ecological recovery, health, well-being, all of those duties. And I think that they will all have funding streams attached to them, and you just need to go into your local authority, and this is what we've been doing with Jen, isn't it? It's just actually starting to track how you can deliver all those different duties at a local authority level through land management, through health, through regenerative agriculture is really important. But you have to find the person in the local authority to work with, find somebody to connect your enthusiasm, and then actually that people will come together with you. And I'm going to Jersey, by the way, in September. So if you,
I'll just say one thing. So for me, if I was trying to do the same thing, I would be looking at what is the financial impact. Fundamentally, these things often come down to how does it make business sense, the financial sense, to make it a no-brainer. So you're trying to see what can you do that is going to have an impact, and trying to find a way to connect that and demonstrate that it's a 10% return becomes a no-brainer for the business in there. So that or whoever it is, the local authority, whoever it may be. So that it's very hard to argue against that if it makes financial sense. That's the hardest thing.
I think we have time for one very quick question. Keep your hand up if you've got a very quick question, just down here.
So, is there funding available for facilitators, like the facilitators in your network? Who's paying for them? Is it the farm clusters or is it other people? And how could one access that?
Yeah, so of the 12, we have a variety of funding streams. A few are privately funded or they're funded through their clusters. Some are still on the facilitation fund, but that will be ending for some next year. The others are, funded by Rothschild Foundation, which I don't know if Ben is here. No. So there are different funding streams, but part of my role is to be looking at the private finance sector more and trying to use our network strength to bring in those funding streams. But maybe...
Can I just make a quick comment about that? I mean, that's the trouble. I've spent 25 years trying to get facilitators funded, and this idea that you actually get the beneficiaries to fund the facilitator is like a eureka moment, because it's like, oh, we don't have to wait for any more funding streams, because most of our work has been funded by environmental trusts and foundations. Obviously there has been government funding, as Alex was saying, but it seems madness to me in this world that people aren't given the opportunity to act, being supported to act, and those facilitators are so important to help people through the maze. It just seems everybody at the moment to me should have access to somebody that can help them, feel some hope, feel some action, feel some movement, join it all up, build some resilience. So self-financing, off-grid, everything is what we need right now. So I think if we can create local resilience that cross-cuts, energy, food, water security, community, equity, good farming, then we all need to crack on, I think. Thank you.
Brilliant. We've run out of time. We could have literally spoken for hours. If you want to know a bit more about the Farmer Collaboration Fund, DEFRA colleagues are behind you over in that tent. Do have a good chat with them. But other than that, please give our panel a warm round of applause.